Hi everyone, I'm Sam and welcome to the Shoogly Stitch, my channel where I talk all things knitting, spinning, and fibercraft related. Today I'm going to talk all about my realistic knitting plans for 2025. I see a lot of plans out there that include, a lot of sweaters, probably 10 plus, and that's not realistic for me. I'm also at a stage in my knitting journey, if you want to call it that, where I have plenty of yarn and don't really need to be buying any more yarn. And also because I do spin, I have been spinning a lot of yarn, but I haven't actually used very much of it. This is going to be taking a look at what's in my stash, and also patterns that may or may not be in my library already, and just making some realistic plans about what I can actually accomplish this year. It's also going to be taking into account what gaps I feel like there are in my wardrobe. So a few of these things have been in my queue to knit for a little while now, and I would actually like to get them done this year. The one caveat is that this is not taking into consideration any works in progress that I already have on the go. If they're on the go and not finished yet, it might be for a good reason. I might be kind of bored with them, or they're not a priority for things that I actually want to finish and have in my wardrobe. So yeah, I'm not 100% certain if I'll get through all of these this year, but it's not out of the realms of possibility, so why not include them all on the list and we'll see where we get to. I'm obviously not going to be holding myself to this 100% just because that's not something that I find serves me well. So if there's something else that comes along that catches my eye that I think would be better use of a pattern, I might change it in the future. But at this particular moment in time, this is what I think I want to do with these yarns. And a few of these patterns have actually been in my queue for a while, so I'm pretty set on the fact that this is what I want to use each of these yarns for. A few things I'll mention. Today I'm wearing my Lucia jumper, my Lucia sweater. This is a pattern by Suri Nordland and it's knit in Filcolana Peruvian Highland wool. I think the color was something like gray melange. It's just a light heathered gray and I wear it all the time. It's the only pattern I have that has this amount of ease, and so I'm definitely looking to replicate that in some form this year, and you'll see that with one of the patterns on my list. And then while I'm chatting to you, I'll be knitting on these socks. I've been working on these for a little while now. They are just a broken rib pattern, which is perhaps not like the best for this variegated yarn, but oh well. I wanted something more interesting than just a vanilla sock, and so I chose this. And these are actually for my grandma. She picked out the yarn. I think the colorway is called Seattle, and it's from a local yarn company that's based back in my hometown of Walla Walla, Washington, called Pearl 2. So yeah, I'm knitting on these and hoping to have them done by the time I go back and visit this summer. So without further ado, let's get started on the patterns. I'm going to work through this in 3 sections. The first is garments, and I have a few garments. And then next I will move on to accessories, and I have a few accessories as well, which is always good to mix in there. I like to break up some of the garment knits with a few quicker things. And then I actually have a few people in my life that are having babies this year or in the near future. So I do have a few baby patterns on the project list as well. And that'll be the last section. So the first pattern on my list is called Eagan. And this is a pattern by from Brooklyn Tweed, and it's by Fiona Alice. And this is going to be using some of my hand spun yarn. And it's been spun since, I believe, 2023 is when I finished it. And it is a blend of alpaca and BFL. The alpaca is actually from a farm back home. It was a lady that my mom knew who had alpacas, and the fleece was just going spare, so I managed to bring it back here, wash it up, and it was actually one of my early fleece projects, was washing that alpaca. And then I blended it with some brown BFL that I had on hand. So it's made a really lovely lofty yarn. It was also my first experience of spinning worsted. So yeah, I'm really keen to use the yarn in a sweater. I have a full sweater's quantity. And the pattern that I've chosen is called Eagan. And it is almost like reminiscent of a Gansey style. So it is a textured knit, but not heavily textured, because this is a little bit fluffy and a little bit heathery. So I didn't want to hide the texture completely. So it's just a mix of ribbing rows and garter stitch rows. And obviously it's quite a lightweight jumper. It's fingering. This maybe leans towards sport weight, but either way, it should really suit the yarn. The yarn should suit the pattern. It is a drop shoulder pattern. It looks like it's written in kind of a unisex style. So it doesn't look like there's any shaping in the body. So you could do it. It's modeled on both a man and a woman. I really like it. I think it's got a really classic look. And I think it'll make a really kind of classic looking jumper that should just make a nice addition to my wardrobe. I could see myself wearing this with a few things that I already own. You could wear it with a collared shirt underneath. I could wear it with kind of blue or green trousers. So I think it'll be a great addition to my wardrobe, and I would really love to actually use some more of my hand spun yarn. So that is my first thing on the list, the Eagan sweater. I also think it should be just interesting enough, so it's not rows and rows of stockinette. The ribbing and the garter should make it a little bit more interesting to knit as well. The next project I want to talk about is using this lovely yarn from a local to me dyer, Charlotte of Nervus Fibres, and she's based in Glasgow. And this is yarn I actually received a couple years back now in exchange for doing a sample knit in I think it was a superwash merino DK as well as a Suri silk, and this is a Suri silk, and then this is 100% Corriedale. So my plans for this is the Agnete Cardigan by Petite Knit, and this is a really beautiful color. It's called Mist Cloak. It's kind of the perfect gray brown, so it's definitely a gray, but I would say a very warm toned gray, which makes it super versatile for different like combining with different outfits. So that is my plan for this. And the Agnete Cardigan, if you haven't seen it, is by Petite Knit, and it's basically my perfect brioche drop shoulder cardigan. So it looks like kind of super commercial. You would get it, I don't know, on the high street, which to me is a positive. I could see it being really versatile. I could see myself pairing it with like high-waisted jeans, kind of loose jeans. I've got these kind of looser cut cords that I really like to wear. I think it would be great with that, but I could also see it with a nice dress. I could wear it to the office. I could dress it up, dress it down. So I think it would be a really great garment to have in my wardrobe, and it's actually something that I feel like I'm missing. It's definitely a gap that I've noticed. I have a few different cardigans that I've knit, particularly the April cardigan, but that is a much closer fitting style. With more of a set-in sleeve, whereas the Agnete Cardigan is a drop sleeve, more kind of cozy, oversized vibes. And again, I have a different one as well, the Calais cardigan that I knit last year, which you would tend to wear. It's an open cardigan, but it's a little bit bulkier because that's an Aran weight yarn, whereas this is probably the equivalent of a DK. It's a fingering and a Suri silk held together. So I think it will definitely fill a hole in my wardrobe, and I would really like to get that done this year. I know an all over brioche knit will take a little bit of time, but given that it's something that I've had on my list to knit for the best part of 2 years, I think I really need to commit to it and make an effort to do that this year. The next thing on my list is using this yarn called A Room of My Own Wold, and this is in the color Puddle, which I think is just such a fun name. This is 100% British wool. It's Southdown, BFL, and Shetland. And this is by Susan Crawford. So you may have seen a lot of her designs. They're very vintage inspired, or kind of modern recreations of vintage knitting patterns. Not all of them are to my taste, but she has a really lovely collection that came out, or a book that came out last year, published by Lina. and I actually did a sample knit for that book as well. So there's a stripy shawl that's in there. I'll have to look up the name, but I actually knit that shawl, and it's the one that I actually knit is what was used in the photographs. So that's a fun fact. And as payment, I got to pick out a sweater quantity of yarn. So I picked out this yarn in this lovely color, and my plans for this are to make the Seaway Pullover by Ozetta. And I think this is a really unique pattern. I think I will probably buy potentially an alpaca lace weight to hold along with this blue. I believe that Filcolana Alva is an option, and I think they have a lot of different colors, just to meet gauge. Now the Seaway Pullover, if you haven't seen it, I think it came out a few years ago, I'm not sure, maybe last year, but it definitely caught my eye as soon as it came out, because it's a cabled pullover, but not in the way you might normally think. It's a drop shoulder, fairly loose fitting, kind of a mock neck, longer rib collar, and it is all over cables, but there's not like any purling to separate the cables. It's just like a sea of stockinette, and then every so often there's these cable twists. So I think it'll actually be pretty easy to knit. It looks quite straightforward, but it's just so unique. And for the longest time, I couldn't figure out what yarn to use, because it's such a subtle texture that you need something that's probably really quite light, that won't take away from it too much. So I will need to swatch this because it is ever so slightly variegated. It is a hand-dyed yarn. So I just want to make sure that you can actually see that texture work up in this lovely hand-dyed yarn. But that is the current plan. If not, I'm sure there's plenty of other lovely things out there. I'll probably do a similar kind of drop shoulder style. I'm looking to mimic the fit of this jumper, just because I reach for this constantly, and because it's such a textured, distinctive knit, I feel like it's very obvious if I wear it all the time. So I'm definitely looking to have a few more things with this fit in my wardrobe. So that's the current plans for this yarn, is the Seaway Pullover. Now, with all of the whips that I already have on the needles, which may or may not be finished by the end of the year, I think 3 sweaters is more than enough for me. I'm not the fastest knitter. I know that I have other gift knits that might need to be done throughout the year, and I just don't want to put any pressure on myself. So it is just those 3 jumpers that are on my list. And realistically, I mean, how many sweaters do I need to add to my wardrobe in a year? I can only wear so many things, and I'm trying to be kind of conscious about how much I add to my wardrobe, and how much space I have, and what I'm wearing. Am I wearing everything I've made? So I think 3 is probably plenty. However, I do have one more garment, and that is a vest. So the vest I am planning to knit is the Tessellated Vest by Andrea Mowry, and it is using these 2 yarns along with it's not also this yarn, but it's another fingering weight that is very similar. So kind of like a light gray, a mid-toned gray, and this long color changing handspun yarn. And the reasoning for that is I want to use more of my handspun. I originally planned to spin, when I was spinning this yarn, to do a combo spin, but decided I didn't really love how it was turning out with this particular braid, so I instead chain plied this braid on itself, and it's made kind of a self-striping yarn, and I'm not really sure that the colorway is like something I would want on its own. However, if you look at the Tessellated Vest, it's one of these mosaic knits that Andrea Mowry does a lot of, so it's already designed for like a spin cycle yarn, and granted, this is not marled like a spin cycle yarn, but I feel like it's kind of a similar idea, and it uses 3 colors, and given that the 2 other colors will be a gray and a lighter gray, I think they should tone down this kind of self-striping pink, blue, green combination very nicely. And I've been really enjoying vests a lot lately. I received a Fair Isle vest, not hand knit, just like commercially knit, for Christmas, and honestly I am constantly reaching for it. So I think this will give off similar vibes, and it won't be too hard to wear. I can just wear kind of a neutral underneath. So yeah, I'm excited to again use some more of my handspun, use up some yarn that I've had in my stash. This was leftover, the Rerum Natura Ulysse. I used this for my April cardigan, And I have, I think, 2 or 3 full balls left. So I'm not sure what was up with the yardage estimates on that, but I have a lot left. And so I didn't want to just make a hat or something that wasn't going to make the most of it. So I think making a garment out of it should be perfect. It's more towards a sport weight, I think. Sport to DK, depending on how tightly you knit it. And this is more fingering to sport, but I think it should all work together all right, especially because it's a mosaic knit. There's definitely layers of fabric, like your slipping stitches and whatnot, so it's quite a dense fabric on this vest, so I don't think it should be an issue. One of the suggested contrasts is using a fuzzy yarn, which would be even lighter weight than this, so I'm really not concerned that it's going to be a problem. So yeah, that is the final garment pattern that I have on my 2025 to knit list, a vest. And again, not all of these are things that I would 100% like feel like I'm missing in my wardrobe, but some of it's a way to use up yarn. And that's part of what I find really quite fun when I'm working from stash, is that it forces you to be creative about what you're knitting in a way that just like being able to go out and buy the yarn doesn't make you be creative in the same sense. Like if I was just looking at a pattern and being like, oh, I like that pattern, I could just go buy the yarn. There's not the same kind of hunting for what might fit your specifications to use up that quantity of yarn. And that's something I've really enjoyed when planning all of these projects. So the next part we're going to go through is accessories, and the first thing on my list is actually in the same yarn that I knit this jumper out of, and I have a few balls left, and it is this Filcolana Peruvian Highland wool in the light gray. It's a great color, really no problems with it. It's not overly itchy, and my plans are to make the Hugo Collar by Suri Nordland. This calls for an Aran yarn, and it is a garter rib pattern. So it's kind of like a turtleneck, or like quite a loose turtleneck really, and it's quite wide on the shoulders, and it just goes down the body. So kind of, I guess some people call it a dickie, a collar, that kind of thing. It's something I've thought for a little while would be actually really great to add to my wardrobe. I think it would be really useful in the winter, for like walking the dog. I always have a bit of annoyance when I'm like figuring out neckwear. I particularly don't like when there gets a draft between like a cowl or a scarf and the back, like, and a jumper. So I think this could solve that problem. And again, I didn't just want to use this for a hat when I knew I had more than a hat quantity. So I think this pattern should use just about all the yarn I have up, and then I can see how I feel about collars. This may be the only one I ever knit, but I think it seems like an interesting thing to try, and it's been kind of in the back of my mind as something to give a go, something I've never knit before. So that is my first accessory plan, is the Hugo Collar. My next plan is nothing groundbreaking by any means, and I know everyone's been knitting them, but it's the Penny Glove by Petite Knit, and it's using these 2 leftover yarns. One is again a handspun, and I love this handspun because it's actually from yarn that I got from my cousin's farm. So when I was visiting home back last year, I got married. I went back to the States and got married, and then visited some family. And the farm that my grandparents live on, my aunt and uncle and cousins also live on now, they have sheep. And they have sheep primarily for meat, but they also happen to have some bags of fleece just sitting there because I visited not long after they sheared the sheep. And so I asked about them, and they said, yeah, take it. It's probably going to be, burned or put in the garbage, whatever. They didn't have a use for it. And actually, it turned out really nice. I think it's maybe some kind of mix of Columbia sheep breed. They didn't know. I don't think my grandpa had a specific breed, but it's not rough by any means. It's definitely soft, like kind of crispy, but not itchy, if that makes sense, in the way that woolly wool can be kind of crisp feeling. So I've already made a hat that I'm going to send back to them, as long as the size is correct. But I think I should have enough left, and I also have this leftover drops alpaca silk. to hold together to make some penny gloves. I made fingerless gloves for the first time this year for me, and I have been wearing them literally every day for walking the dogs because it does exactly what I want. It keeps my hands warm with my fingers being free to like get treats out or get like poo bags out of my pocket, that kind of thing. They're just a lot more flexible than mittens and gloves are. So I've been wanting another pair, particularly for like driving to work or just driving. So I think having cream gloves is a bold choice, but it's this leftover yarn that I have, and I don't really have very much of the alpaca silk. I think I have about one full ball. I have two of these half-used balls. So that is my current plan for that. The final pattern is the Liab Hat, and that is by Isolde, and that's using this yarn from the Scottish Yarn Festival, and that's Clan DK, and that's left over from the zipper sweater light that I made a few years back. I have exactly one skein left. It's already wound up. I do plan to lengthen the sleeves on that jumper a little bit, but I don't think I should use too much of this, and I should still have enough yarn left to make this pattern, which I already had in my library, so I want to actually use patterns that I have in my library. It's part of her Knitworthy collection, which are intended for for gift knitting, basically. So I think that will be a great use of this DK yarn, and it'll be another thing out of my library and out of my stash, which is always perfect. That's the final specific garment that I have plans to make. I do also intend to knit through some socks from the second volume of the 52 Weeks of Socks books, which I received for Christmas. I have plenty of sock yarn basically, and no particular plans on exactly which patterns to make, but I have, like I said, plenty of sock yarn, so I think I may just do some kind of dice rolling situation, roll the dice, let it choose what pattern I want to make, and go from there, or random number generator perhaps. So yeah, that's the current plan. Don't mind Rosie over here. The final thing on my list is a few baby knits, like I said, for friends who are pregnant. The first thing is the Ankers Sweater, which I think is just so cute. Again, a petite knit pattern. And I have this yarn that I actually just got from Aldi, which is a nice beige. But I don't actually know what genders the babies are going to be yet, and I think acrylic yarn is great for babies. I don't think my friends are going to be washing their children's clothes and like wanting to deal with wool, basically. So nothing wrong with this kind of yarn for that type of project. And I think this is a super cute pattern. Should knit up really quick. So that's part of why it's on my list. So yeah, that's the Ankers Sweater. I might mix up some of these baby patterns. We'll see what catches my fancy at the time. I also have the Broch Beanie already in my library, and that's another one from Isolde. And this is one that's intended to use up scraps, so it comes in sizes from like baby to adult. So my intention is to use up, again, some scrap sock yarn. I feel less concerned about using wool yarn like superwash merino, which is unlikely to felt anyways, but on baby hats, just because they're less likely to be put in the wash as frequently as a jumper, and also superwash yarn can go in the wash and just might not last as long as acrylic, but again, a hat is less likely to need to be washed as frequently, and also they outgrow them. But I think it'll be a fun use of some rainbow yarn scraps that I have left over, and again, that way I can use it for either gender. So yeah, that's the Broch Beanie by Isolde as well. And then I also have plans for these stretchy baby socks by Fabienne Schult. It's a free pattern that has really good comments and reviews of over 500 projects, or no, nearly 500 projects anyways. They're meant to be really stretchy, so I figured why not, I'll give it a go. And again, I have plenty of scrap sock yarn, so I think that'll be fun and knit up really quickly. It's a ribbed knitting pattern, so they're super stretchy, which should mean that they last a little bit longer than perhaps some other patterns. And then the last pattern for babies is the Baby Bear Bonnet by Pernille Larsen. And again, this is already in my library because I've knit it before for a different friend. And it came out pretty well. I think it was a little bit big, to be honest, but I'll probably knit a slightly smaller size this time. And I have a lovely kind of brown color, which even if it's a girl, I think a bear colored bonnet would be suitable. So brown can work for either way it goes. So that's already in my stash as well. So none of those knits will require additional yarn aside from this, which I already found today and was literally probably like £3 for a couple balls of this. So that is all the knits that I have in the plans for 2025. It sounds attainable, I think, which is always good. I don't want to overwhelm myself with feeling like I need to do too much. I'm really trying to cut back on how much I gift knit and also cut back on the deadlines. So while I would love to knit baby blankets for my friends, and I did initially have that kind of in the works, I don't think I'll be knitting baby blankets because I'm the only one who's expecting myself to knit gifts for these people. And I do love to do it, but why? Like, they will appreciate a jumper and a hat and socks just as much, if not more, than a baby blanket. And it'll be a lot quicker for me to knit those things than it will be for me to knit a whole 2 baby blankets. So I'm trying to make myself, like, put less pressure on myself to give gifts that no one else is expecting me to give, and that, do I even really want to knit? I'm trying to be a little bit more thoughtful about how I actually want to spend my time. And I think the thing is, I would like to have knit those things to give them, but I'm not sure I want to do the actual process of knitting the things to give them, if that makes sense. Like, if I had already done it, if it was done, or maybe I had started them like years ago, and I could give them baby blankets, then that would be great. But I'm not sure that I want to try and do 2 whole baby blankets in the next, like 8 months or whatever it is. So yes, that is my current thoughts about gift knitting. Generally trying to not have so many deadlines in my life when it relates to my knitting, because then it just sucks all the joy out of it for me. The one exception to that is that I have been knitting my husband a cardigan for like the better part of 2 years. So I did tell him I would have it done by his birthday, which is the beginning of March. So that is the one upcoming deadline that I do have and that I will be working on. However, I am halfway done with the sleeves and the body is done as well. So I just need to finish the sleeves and then sew the entire thing together. But that should be fine by the end of February. So I think that is everything from me. I would love to hear what you think about this kind of approach of a little bit more realistic knitting goals. I'm not even calling them goals, I don't think. But yeah, a little bit more realistic, working from my stash, working from my library, working with what I already have. I feel like it's a bit of a trend at the moment. I don't know if you're feeling the same way, but I certainly know that I already have a lot of things in my stash that I enjoy and love and would like to use up and have products from, have the finished product. So rather than going out and buying more, I'm going to focus on using up the things that I already have that I know I like. So please let me know what you're thinking, how you're approaching planning for the year. If you're approaching planning for the year, I know this is a little bit, later, I'm already into February, but that should give you a peek into my life and how good I am at planning, or not. So yeah, I would love to hear if you guys are feeling the same. Are you just still buying? Are you fine with your stash? Do you want to work through your stash? I don't know, any thoughts in that regard? And if you want to hear more about knitting, more about spinning, anything generally fiber related, I'd love if you could give this video a like and also subscribe to the channel. That would definitely help me out. So I will hopefully see you again soon, and it's been great to spend some time with you. See you the next time. Bye!